morning. Now, I know for some of you kids in here, sometimes it can be tough to have to hang around in the auditorium for the entire service. But I do want to say, we're really glad that you can be in here this morning because this is something, what I have to say today is good for everybody in here, okay? No matter what your age is. And I would give you a challenge, okay? One of you kids, all of you kids. And that is, sometimes you may not be aware of this, but while you are in kids track, and maybe your parents are in here, sometimes what happens is they can get a little sleepy. And maybe they can just nod off a little bit. And sometimes even it can get as bad where they might even snore. Not very often. But what I want you to do is if you notice that your parent seems to be getting a little drowsy in here, you just give them a nice little elbow, okay? Wake them up, okay? So if things do get a little bit out of hand where you're just not really, you're having a hard time focusing, well then focus on your mom or dad and make sure that they stay awake, okay? Can you do that? Can we? Okay. All right, and you parents, make sure you stay awake. What I have to share this morning, the story I have to tell, comes from a couple different passages in the Bible. It comes from, there's some passages in Psalms, also in Isaiah and in Romans, where it talks about a potter and the clay. I want to preface, though, what I have to say this morning with the fact that hardly a word of what I'm going to say this morning is true. The names, the places have been changed, but in the same way that Jesus used parables, it's my prayer that you will get the point of the story. I was just a lump of clay, a handful of dirt, a pile of mud there by the riverbank. I was just a lump of clay. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever amazing was a part of my life. But I was not just an ordinary lump of clay. For you see, I had dreams. I had ambition. I was going to be something someday, and I was going to make a difference. Someday, I was going to be on a pedestal, and bright lights would shine down on me. And people would gather from all around, and they would look at me and say, ooh, beautiful! But nothing really ever amazing happened there on that riverbank. I just sat there until one day, a man was walking along the riverbank. And every few feet or so, he would stop, he would kneel down, and he would pick up a little bit of the clay. And if it felt just right, and even tasted just right, he would put some of it into his basket and continue on down the riverbank. When I saw him coming, I got so excited. Oh, pick me, pick me, pick me! The man got closer, and he knelt down right next to me, and he picked me up, and he felt me, and he tasted me. Oh, please pick me. Please, please, please pick me. I want to be somebody. I want to make a difference. I want to be on a pedestal someday, and I want lights to shine down on me. And I want people to come from all around and look at me and say, ooh, beautiful. The man put his shovel and picked me up all the way and placed me in his basket. If I had a heart, it would have been beating so fast as he carried me away. As I realized that now I finally was going to see the fulfillment of my dreams. I was going to be somebody. Back at the shop, the man took me out of his basket and he placed me on a shelf. It smelled a lot like the riverbank inside that shop, and there were other lumps of clay also around me. And I watched carefully as every so often the man would take one of those lumps of clay and he would take it over to a wheel, and the wheel would spin around very fast. And like a very careful artist, the potter would begin to shape that clay as it spun around so quickly. And it was amazing to see the things that he could make. Often, the little lump of clay would transform into a beautiful vase. Or sometimes it would be a gorgeous pitcher or a graceful urn. And he would take it off of his wheel and he would go and put it on another shelf. And it was amazing to see the transformation that had occurred, where you could tell that most of these creations could easily go in a palace, in just useful and graceful service for a king. Finally, the potter came to me, and he picked me up off the shelf, and he placed me on the wheel. And I began to turn so quickly, and just like the other pieces of clay, the man began to form me and shape me. Oh, I couldn't wait to see what I was going to become. This was going to be the greatest day ever to experience this transformation. And he stuck his hands in there nice and deep, and things began to take shape, and I began to change and shift and move till finally he was done. And he picked me up, and he moved me to the shelf. And I looked, and on one side there was one of those beautiful vases. And on the other side there was a gorgeous pitcher. But as I caught a glimpse of myself, I realized that I didn't have the same features as everyone else. For the potter had made me into a pot. A pot? How could this happen? I was just a lump of clay, but I wasn't just an ordinary lump of clay. I was going to make a difference. I was going to be somebody. And someday I would be on a pedestal and there'd be lights all around me and people would come from all around and say, ooh, ah, beautiful. But I was just a pot. And what good could ever come from a pot? Time went by in that shop. And different people would come in at different times to purchase some of the things that the potter had made. One day, a very elegant-looking man came in. He had on a robe. You could tell right away that he was royalty. You could tell that he was very important. And as I saw him come in, everything in me wanted to scream out, pick me, please, please, please pick me. I want to make a difference. I want to be on a pedestal, and I would be perfect for you. I just know it. But as the man walked up to the shop owner, it was clear that he was not looking for a pot. And he began to pick up all of the beautiful vases and all of the graceful urns and the gorgeous pitchers, but he didn't have any need for just the old pot. And the man left. And I just continued to sit there on that shelf until another day when someone else walked into that shop. Someone that was quite young. It was a younger boy, and he didn't smell very good. He didn't look very good. And if I had a voice, I would have said, please do not pick me. And the boy went up to the shop owner and said that he was looking for a pot. And all he had was just a couple pennies. A pot? No, not a pot. Please do not pick me. Any other pot, just not me. He picked me. He picked me, took me under his arm, and walked out of the shop. And he took me to a tent. He took me to a tent that had a dirt floor, and he walked over to the corner and just placed me on the floor, right in the dirt. And then it got worse. He put lima beans in me. Ew, lima beans? I hate lima beans. I don't think anybody likes lima beans. I was just a lump of clay, a pile of dirt, a handful of mud. But I was not just an ordinary lump of clay. I was going to be something. I was going to make a difference. I was going to matter. I was going to be on a pedestal, and lights were going to shine down all around me, and people were going to look at me and say, ooh, ah, beautiful. But now here I was, sitting on a dirt floor inside a tent filled with lima beans. As time went by, I realized that I was in the tent of someone that was quite important. It was actually a general. Someone that had a lot of influence with many soldiers. Someone that had done a lot of amazing things. But it was also quite clear that this general was a little different. Not weird, just a little different. Because he would speak to voices that I couldn't see. He would hear things and obey them, but I couldn't see where the voice was coming from. One day, it was decided that there was going to be a great battle. And if I had a heart, it would have beat so fast. Because maybe he would need a pot. Maybe he would use me, and maybe this would be my chance where I could shine and I could win the battle for this general. This general had 32,000 men at his disposal, and he was going to get ready for war. But then he did something quite peculiar. He sent 10,000 of his soldiers home. Okay. And then he did something even more peculiar. He sent home the rest of his soldiers until all he had left were 300 men. I decided I didn't want to be a part of this battle anymore. This general was quite crazy. There is no way that I wanted to have any say in this battle. I would be happy to stay there in the tent because this general was crazy. He was going to get himself killed. The general assembled his 300 men and told them to grab their swords and to take up a trumpet and to take a lamp and to make sure they grabbed a pot. A pot? Why do you need a pot for a battle? Why in the world would you use a pot? Why do you need me? Don't pick me. He picked me. The general picked me up, and he dumped out the lima beans, which was nice. But then he took a smelly, oily lamp, and it smelled even worse than the lima beans. And the men marched off into the night. It was very dark that night. And the general held me very tightly, and he and his men made sure that they were very quiet as they snuck into enemy territory, and they gathered around the enemy's tents. And at the signal of the general, everyone took their trumpets and blew them in the air, and they raised their pots high. And with unison and all at once, they took their pots and they threw them up. and came crashing down to the ground until all of the pots were broken in pieces. And the general, he just left me there. The general broke me, threw me on the ground, and left. Later, I realized that there had been a great victory, but I didn't have any say in the matter. I was just a pot. Now a cracked pot. And then he left me to lay in the dirt. Didn't the general know? I had been a lump of clay. I was just a lump of clay, but I was not just an ordinary lump of clay. I realized I had been turned into a pot, but I was going to make a difference. I was going to be somebody. I was going to sit on a pedestal. Lights were going to shine all around me, and people were going to come from all around. And they were going to look at me, and they were going to say, ooh, ah, beautiful. But now, all I was broken, laying there in the dirt. And years passed. Decades went by. Centuries flew by. Until one day, some very peculiar looking people started poking around the dirt. And you could see that they were professionals. You could tell that they were looking for something very specific. And as they got closer to me, one of them got very excited. Crikey! Check this out! And they began to uncover all of my pieces. And they began to dust them off. And they would just continue to exclaim how excited they were. And slowly and very carefully, they began to pick up all of my pieces. Stopping occasionally to say, ooh, and ah, and in unison say, beautiful. And as they slowly picked up all of my pieces, they made sure that they were very thorough.
Oh, this is a mess, isn't it? Hey.
To make sure that not a single piece was left.
I'll have to get Scott to clean this up after we're done.
Finally, they picked up all the pieces, and they very carefully took them away to somewhere that I'd never been before. Somewhere that was quite confusing. And I didn't know what was going on. And the peculiar looking people worked quite hard to eventually put me back together again. Until they were all done. And they very carefully, very gingerly, came back into the other room. Oh, ooh, and they almost dropped me again, but thanks to the incredible quick thinking, wit, and skill of one of them, they saved it, and they placed me on a pedestal. And they took a light and they shined it down on top of me. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. What was all the attention all about? Why did these people care? Why did they feel that I was special. Soon they put a sign up on the pedestal. And as they put it up, I almost fell off trying to catch a glimpse of what the sign said. And I realized that it said Gideon's pot. And still, every so often, people would come around and they would look at me and they would say, ooh, ah, beautiful. And it was then, though, that I realized that people weren't oohing and eyeing because of my beauty. They weren't oohing and eyeing because I was gorgeous. They were oohing and eyeing because of my cracks. Because you see, I had been broken by the hand of the general. Have you been broken by the hand of the general? In Romans chapter 9, verses 20 and 21, it talks about how can the clay ever say to the potter, why have you made me like this? How dare you make me like this? Can the thing that's created, does it have any authority at all to question the design of the Creator? Does it? No, it doesn't. And in the same way, every single one of us in here has been created with a purpose. And you know what? Many of us in here, we have cracks. Some of us in here, we wanted so bad to be made to be a gorgeous vase, to be put in service to a king. And maybe all we've seen of our life has just been made out to be like a pot. And not just a pot, where maybe we've even been broken. But I want to say something to every single one of us in here. It's through the brokenness, it's through the pain, as we have been broken by the hand of our general, that a lot of times our true purposes are accomplished. And there can be sometimes even greater awareness of the specific design God has through our lives through the pain. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you that you know what you're doing. Thank you that you are a God who can be trusted, and that nothing in our life has happened from a mistake. But Lord, that you are working all things out for your good. And I thank you that we can trust you. Thank you that we can believe that you are going to work things out, even if it may not make sense right now. And I just pray for every single one of us in here, as we all are some sort of clay, would you mold us? Would you shape us? Would you even break us in the way that you need or want to, just so that you can get greater glory through our lives? And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.